aerospace and defense manufacturing,
machines and automation,
additive manufacturing,
smart manufacturing,
the global manufacturing economy.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Steve Plum, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. Please remember to like and subscribe to our feed. I'm joined today by Dave Evans, CEO of Fictiv. Dave, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
So I was going to give a brief description of Fictiv, but I figured since you're here, it would probably be better and more accurate coming from you. But first of all, tell us a little bit more about yourself and the impetus of creating Fictiv. And I know you're a mechanical engineer by trade and started off at Ford's Innovation Lab in Silicon Valley, but also have a master's degree in Chinese from Stanford. So that's an interesting and unique combination.
Well, I was actually going to make you do it, Steve, but I think this is where I say a longtime listener and viewer, and nice to be here. Thanks for having me. But yeah, Dave Evans, you got it almost right, but the master's degree actually belongs to my brother and co-founder of the business. So I'm a engineer builder at heart. I've been favorite story is I run in when I'm 4 years old and say, Mommy, I've fixed your car. And I got a hammer in my hand, and there's about 30 dents in the side of our red Suburban. And I've been fixing things and breaking things, usually not putting them back together my entire life. But studied mechanical engineering at Stanford. Ford was where I cut my teeth, so I'm an automotive guy by background, and spent a lot of time in Dearborn and back and forth between Silicon Valley and Dearborn at that time. And then back in 2013, we founded Fictiv. So we're on our second decade here building the business, and our job is to help simplify sourcing for custom mechanical parts. So we help a lot of innovation companies, small venture-backed businesses, all the way up to, large companies like Honeywell to help scale their supply chain and bring their products to market. And, it's been a fantastic journey. We've spent a lot of time building a lot of custom software and building everything from satellites that are up overhead to humanoid robotics to, a lot of electric vehicles. So we've been at the front of innovation for, over 10 years, and it's been a wild ride, to say the least.
Well, Dearborn's just down the street from us. In fact, we used to be headquartered in Dearborn. We're now in Southfield, Michigan.
Great. I love it. No offense to Dearborn, but I used to love staying in Ann Arbor because the breweries were better, but maybe that's changed now, but you can't pass up a good time to get some, microcraft beer in Ann Arbor and then take the 45-minute drive to Dearborn and get the work in. So, but I love Michigan. It's great.
Even though I'm a Michigan State guy,
oops, sorry, readers. Sorry, Steve.
Ann Arbor is still a great town, though. So automotive has one of the most complex supply chains, to put it mildly. So what were some of the things that you learned from that experience, and how did that drive the impetus to start Fictiv?
Yeah, for sure. I'm like I said, an engineer at heart, always been building and breaking things. And when I first got out of school, I actually did a couple startups, and it was really hard. This first one I did was we were building brakes for bicycles, and this really innovative design, purely mechanical, only had one lever on it versus a front and back brake. And it was basically like a mechanically actuated ABS, automated braking system. It was incredible. But scaling that and getting to market was incredibly challenging. And so I said, hey, this must be, this scale problem must really just be a startup thing. Let's go see how the big boys do it. And so when I joined Ford, 100-year-old company, one of the most prestigious brands in the U.S., it was like, wow, really going to get to see how, this really complex system runs. And I remember walking in, first day of Ford, and I was under Paul Mascarenhas, which was the CTO at the time, and the first hire at this research lab in Palo Alto. And, we're kind of meeting with Paul and his leadership and coming in, and he's like, well, it takes, 4 to 6 years to develop a vehicle platform. And I'm kind of in the back of my mind, like, what do you mean 6 years to develop a car? What are you guys doing, sitting on your hands the whole time? Remember, I come from this mindset of more of a Silicon Valley software background, even though I have mechanical inklings and drive. And so I walked in with this, like, how could it take 6 years to develop a car? and after leaving Ford, several years later, I was like, how is it that we get a car off the line in 6 years? It just felt like the systems were put together, kind of MacGyvered of bubblegum and shoestring. And there's amazing quality, amazing processes, and just some of the smartest people in the world. But it really felt like we were building cars no different than decades prior. And so the innovation in supply chain and the innovation in the tools that actually help get a vehicle off the assembly line, really hadn't fundamentally changed. And when I compared that to, say, looking at the software world, and whether today we talk about AI, but when we were founding the company, this was Airbnb and Uber. You had new companies like TaskRabbit coming out. You had, these massive software companies, built in Silicon Valley that, you see the scale of them. It's like, wow, what I really wanted to do was help build hardware at the speed of software. And said, hey, if we could build hardware at the pace that we're seeing software, really scale, imagine all the innovation that would happen in the world. We could have self-driving cars, we could have rockets that go to Mars, life-saving medical equipment. And the inverse was true, Steve, that if we didn't actually speed up development or build hardware at the speed of software, I don't think we'd see the innovation, that we're seeing today. Like I talked about, of going to Mars or building reusable rockets, EVs, whatever, it might be. And so the impetus really to start Fictiv was this idea to unlock a lot of innovation. And it's been an amazing ride to be at the forefront of that over the last 10 plus years.
Yeah, there's the famous example about the car industry and the computer industry about how the safety critical parts of the car and having it start every time, being reliable and never unexpectedly go offline or crash. But at the same time, there has been a lot of progress and over the air updates and the software platforms that companies have started to implement on the car programs. But and they all took a similar path to Ford with the Innovation Center and tried to create the startup feel and mentality and more of a tech company approach to product development and innovation. How difficult is that for a legacy company like Ford? And what are some of the challenges and how do the companies overcome them?
It was this really amazing experience early on in my career where, because I was the first hire at Silicon Valley's lab, so what we called SVL for Ford. I'm a design engineer. I was leading hardware projects for infotainment systems, dashboards of cars. But because it was this innovation center, we had Bill Ford, so third generation, would come multiple times. Paul Mascarenas, the CTO, Alan Mulally. These are all the guys from a decade plus that ran it. So we had a lot of leadership and middle management that came through. And I remember our first executive review. And at this time, our initiative at that point was all around BYOD, bring your own device into the car. So, iPhones are really becoming popular and tablets. And so you have this kind of legacy company, like you said. We were using the Sync system, for people that know that, which was a Microsoft collaboration. We had these resistive touch screens in a Ford Focus or a Mustang, and they were not good. Let's just put it that way, to say it light, because you'd have sun on it and the lumens weren't good. You'd push the screen because it was resistive. You'd have to hammer your finger. It wasn't capacitive touch. All these issues with the system. And so I remember it's like, well, how are you going to describe this without, kind of calling your baby ugly? A lot of hard people, fantastic vehicle, but the consumer reports were just, really hard on how poor the infotainment system. So I remember showing this entire presentation of duct taped iPads to the infotainment system and saying, hey, we spent 10 years of R&D and research and all these things, and you want to know how users are using our system? With duct tape and iPads. We all agree we have to change this, right? And the first thing that became really meaningful there, and I think this is a great takeaway for a lot of the leaders, is the traditional way of innovation, or in these legacy companies, would be you'd put together a PowerPoint presentation, a bunch of slides, here's how we're going to change the market. And I remember doing something completely different, which was, normal to me, but different for Ford, which we had experiences rather than presentations. So when leadership came in, we didn't sit in a conference room. We'd go downstairs to the garage, and they would sit in a vehicle with a duct taped iPad. And then I'd say, go get in this next vehicle. And we would have 10 to 20 different prototypes of solutions for BYOD. So basically how devices could be brought into the vehicle. And it was all rapid prototyped. A lot of it was 3D printed and mounting solutions, different gauges, data that we pulled out of the CAN bus. And so we drove this innovation style. Don't have an executive presentation, but go have experiences. And that mindset change was profound. And was a lot of the early principles of show it, experience it, rather than, just describe it. And I think that, played a huge part for a lot of the acceleration during my time there at Ford.
So on the automotive side, not only do you have legacy companies with a lot of history and ways that they do things, but you also have legacy customers such as myself that have been used to interacting with their vehicle in a certain way in a long time.
Yeah, open the hood, and I don't want all the wires and plastics. Like I want to. I'm the same guy. I have a 58. I have a 58 in my garage, 220S Mercedes that I'm tinkering with. So I'm no different, Steve. I'm still I'm a wrench. I'm a garage guy.
Yeah, especially when the infotainment systems came out, some of the best ones were just maybe a little bit too advanced for some of the users, and they had to scale back. And in some instances, the old mechanical way may have worked better. But to transfer that over to the manufacturing side, manufacturing is definitely a legacy industry. A lot of the workforce has been there for 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years. What's been the experience with launching Fictiv and how to address the future with the latest technologies and improving efficiency with some of that legacy and learned knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, here's what we saw. We envisioned a world where you could go to Mars, you could build electric cars, you could build life-saving medical devices, and then said, hey, if we want to live in that world, what must be true? And what we believed at the time, which still holds true 12 years later, was you needed to give innovators better access to the world's most creative and expertise manufacturers. And that really what we saw was a gap in the access layer of how Ford can access a supply chain versus a technology-backed company versus an innovator. And so we said, hey, even if you might have a legacy manufacturer, air quotes here for all the listeners, they're incredible craftsmen and women, meaning that the work that they can do on the machines is pushing the boundaries of physics a lot of times. And so we knew that it wasn't about making a better, smarter factory or building better tools for all this. It actually was about building this layer, being the glue that allowed these innovators and creators to really connect together. And so what we set out to do was say, hey, find the best manufacturers in the world, not this large marketplace, not a large, database of suppliers, but to find the best ones in the world, give them tools and technology that allowed, the most innovative companies to access them better. And speed became our criteria for that, Steve. We said that, hey, at Ford, it took me usually 8 to 12 weeks to develop a prototype, to take an idea from my head, send it out for quote, go get parts back in hand. It was an 8 to 12 week process. And if you wanted to build hardware at the speed of software, you needed to take that 8 to 12 week process and move it to days. 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 days. And if you could do that, you could iterate much faster, more iterations, builds a better product. A better product allows you to solve those market needs. And so, that's what we set out to do, was to say, hey, I remember this guy, John Veger, who ran this amazing rapid prototyping facility here in California. And how do you get more people to leverage John's skill set? That's what we set out to do 12 years ago. And today we just do it on a global scale. We operate in 4 countries: Mexico, India, China, and the US. We were just acquired by one of the largest industrial companies, global companies, Misumi, out of Japan. So we really just do this on a global scale today, Steve. But the fact remains true. The best manufacturers have been doing it for decades, and we just want to make it easier, more accessible to access those amazing manufacturers.
But tell us a little bit more about the company and how you've scaled up yourself. What did it start out to be? And you mentioned you have operations on 4 continents now, and just acquired. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But is it still mainly on the software side, or are you doing some production now too? Or
Yeah, great. All great questions. Like many companies that have scaled and, are big brands, it started with 2 guys, Nate and Dave Evans, brothers. Nate studied business and did his master's in Chinese at Stanford. And, I'm a mechanical engineer, and you've heard about me. So you're an engineer and a, international business guy. Nate's a lot more than that, but we'll stereotype him as that. I'm much better looking, but he's the smarter brother. And, we set out to have this really ambitious goal to unlock all this innovation. And, when we started the company, we started it just focused here in California, actually just in the San Francisco Bay Area. We scaled from the Bay Area to California across the US. US, we then added on China, then India, then Mexico as production regions. And Steve, we're doing, helping companies both in the early stages of product development, so prototyping, and we are actually the manufacturer of record. So people will give us their design files, and we will be the ones that execute that. Now, we don't own the factories, but we're accountable for the quality, the pricing, the on-time delivery, any type of engineering change that might happen. So we act as that manufacturer of record, and we're helping companies in the early stage of prototyping all the way through to mass production. And when we talk about mass production, it's usually high mix, low volume. So I'm not building 100 million iPhones, but we'll build 50 satellites, or we'll build, 10,000 medical devices, annually. So we focus on kind of this high mix, low volume setting for a lot of product innovation, and really the mechanical side of their supply chain. But humble beginnings of just 2 brothers wanting to make a dent in the universe, and we're over 400 people today just within Fictiv, and a part of a 12,000 person public company with Misumi.
so you have people co-located then at the customer facilities where you're producing, and
Yeah. So if you look at the structure, the way it's set up is that, you'll have your dedicated customer team. Let's say you're a company working out of Michigan, and that team's comprised of engineers, business development people, program managers that's working, with the customer to develop that product. And then they have an execution team that's in region. So it's Fictiv employees that, let's say you have some die-casted parts and machined parts that are coming out of India. And so we have supply quality engineers and strategic sourcing and program management, logistics, all of those that are running out of India in that case. And let's say you're getting large format sheet metal and welded components coming out of Mexico. You have that same mirrored team that's, in Monterey or Tijuana, wherever, that's managing that supply base on behalf of that company, in Michigan. And so that Michigan company now gets to access this ready-made Fortune 500 supply chain, that's being used from the likes of Honeywell and other big names. But they get access to it right away with, manufacturing partners that we have pre-vetted, onboarded, have deep business relationship as well as technology with. And so we develop a lot of software, Steve, but it's really just to be the glue to streamline things, to do things in days, not weeks and months like I talked about. But the organization's so much more of the operations that we're running globally to build these supply chains on behalf of our customers.
So what does a typical customer look like? I imagine you must have started out in the automotive side, but have expanded across verticals. And was there a typical sweet spot for the size of customer that you take on? And What's the process like once you start working with a company?
Yeah, for sure. So, really low barrier, easy to work with us. Folks go to fictiv.com, you sign up, create an account, and you can upload your drawings and specifications directly there to get instant pricing. So, we at the smallest scale, let me pick one. We were helping the Berkeley FSAE team, so that's the Formula Series, electric Formula Series. We were helping them build, their gearboxes and housings for their competition here just in the late spring. So we're helping student groups, all the way up to, uh, you know, uh, let's take another one, robotics company, that's helping, launch a lot of industrial automation, and they're building, tens and hundreds of robotic solutions a year. So, we're helping build those out all the way up to the large companies like Honeywell, and we're helping build APUs, auxiliary power units, and helping with a lot of end of life and what's called MRO for them. So really the size of company, Steve, doesn't necessarily matter. It's more around the volume of product that we specialize in mechanicals, and where the volumes are, relatively low, not millions and tens of millions of units annually. And then we tend to do a lot of innovation products, so new product development versus sustaining work as well.
So speaking of size, Fictiv's world just got a lot bigger with the recent news that you mentioned earlier. So the acquisition of Misumi in June. Tell us a little bit more about that. How that came about and what it means to you and your customers.
Yeah, I mean, one, I've been a customer of Misumi since forever, and we've had a large commercial partnership with them where when our customers are building robots or satellites or medical devices, they're ordering both standard components from Misumi, and they're ordering custom components from Fictiv. And so building a single digital platform that allows them to order both standard and custom is a pretty natural fit, and frankly one that our customers really help to validate and push. And so Misumi has an incredible track record of quality, on-time delivery, and 70-year-old organization that has just this amazing view on the future of manufacturing. And so to partner up with a startup and, technology company like Fictiv to blend into that is, I think really a huge win for both our customers and our manufacturing partners globally that actually do the execution. So yeah, this was just announced that we were fully acquired, got to go through that entire process, both the regulatory and the financial side. And but I think the value that's being delivered to our customers is just phenomenal. And, we've seen a great uptake of that simplified solution.
So the supply chain platform, you already have the space system. When was that introduced? And tell us a little bit more about what all that entails.
Yeah, when we first started the company, we were really focused on prototyping, so the early stage of product development. It was really from my pain point of, hey, these prototypes are taking 8 to 12 weeks at Ford. How do we get those down to days, sub 1 week? And so probably for the first, call it 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it was really prototype focused. And really, it was probably right around the first Trump administration when the first tariffs hit in 18, 19. We're like, wow, there's a bigger problem to tackle here beyond just prototyping, but how do you simplify really this global trade environment that, is changing? And obviously we had no idea that the pandemic was going to happen, that then you'd have Suez Canal, you'd have, all these force majeure situations that really disrupted supply chain. But probably, in 18 and 19, that was the first time we said, hey, we need to go beyond prototyping and focus on production and supply chain. And so for the last 5 to 6 years, I'd say we've been focused on building this solution to help companies move from prototype through to production, or really to go from an engineering focused team to a supply chain as well on top of it, to really help it go from the engineers to a supply chain organization and scale up. And so that's a pretty mature solution at this point that we, spend half a decade building a solution that helps do sourcing for custom mechanical parts. And in that example I talked about with the Michigan company, our best customers are leveraging all 4 global regions through a single platform, which is Fictiv. And, they're getting a lot of cost out of their bill of materials. They're de-risking by being geographically dispersed. And they're frankly helping to reshore a lot of products as well to bring them back to the US. So it's really helping them do all those things, reduce cost, reduce risk, and scale up their product.
So for a large company with hundreds or thousands of suppliers across, multi-tiers and geographies, how long does it really take to implement a process, like this platform?
Yeah. I mean, our best customers have been with us, I don't know about a decade, but, 5, 6, 7 years. And so typically the process works is that, you have a initiative, say, to cost down a bill of materials, to maybe expand your margins, or you need to reduce risk because you see all the geopolitical and trade war that's going on right now. So, someone might come with one of these initiatives to reduce risk or maybe remove some cost to expand margins. And, typically within, a few months, we have a clear plan and you're starting to see the benefits right away. When we're talking about the supply chain side, within, a quarter, you're seeing major benefits from transferring that supply chain. Now that's one pathway, Steve, that comes in. The other way is you have a brand new product, you come in, you've done all the prototyping with us, and, that can be as quick as you're uploading a part and parts are in hand the next day. And as that product is maturing, you move from all the rapid prototyping services we do to really, more of a supply chain solution where you're like, great, thanks, Fictiv. You built 1, 5, 10, 100 of these. We now want to go build our first 1,000, and we're helping build that solution for you to build the next 1,000. So really 2 entry points there, Steve. You're coming down with a supply chain need, or maybe you're doing your new product development with us. And both are great ways that we love working with customers.
Your type of business, you get to see some good success stories, and that could have some large scale benefits and and efficiencies or cost. Any that come to mind? I mean, you mentioned the one Michigan example. Any other favorites that kind of come to mind that where you're really, wow, we really help this company?
I think one that's recent that I love is we work with a public company that's in the telecommunication space. So they make satellites, that work with the largest telecoms to provide connectivity for all the cell phones that you use. You can actually see it maybe, Steve, when you were hiking and your phone moves to satellite connected mode, it's probably through this company. And when we first met them, they were running on a pure U.S. supply chain, and the costs were really high to get these satellites to space. And so we helped work with them to globalize their supply chain and removed 40% of cost within the first 6 months. And so when you're launching real satellites into space that have, long cycles that they have to last for, quality is really important, traceability is really important. You're dealing with, components that are on the edge of, what's possible to actually manufacture. So being able to keep that level of quality while ramping up to, double and triple your production output and reducing cost, this is kind of the holy grail, for a lot of companies. And so I love talking about, satellites, one, because I can turn to my daughter and say, hey, see that thing in the sky? Dad helped build it, and our team's really proud of that. But 2, that we help make these businesses more profitable and scale to really deliver those solutions. So I think that's another good real example for you.
So a few years ago, the auto industry was saying that they're on the cusp of the biggest transformation in 50 or 100 years, with all the different technologies that are coming on board, and the different ways that they're interacting with consumers as well as customers and suppliers. And some of that's also happening throughout manufacturing, especially with Industry 4.0, and you have all these new technologies and digitalization, and sometimes they could be competing technologies. What are some of the challenges of implementing solutions and helping companies move forward, especially with the smaller or mid-sized companies that may not have all the resources or wherewithal, and it's almost just a matter of day-to-day operations for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's, the problems that the Fords and GMs of the world have. And then there's also, more the up and coming or, call them mid-market businesses that don't have the reach of that. What I talk to a lot of business leaders about is, where are you differentiated in your company? And are you putting all your resources into that differentiation? And most of the time, those business leaders will say, my supply chain is not my differentiation. Or if they do say, hey, we have critical components that's, intellectual property for how we source that, say, okay, well, is the team that's managing that and the full bill of material, is that differentiated? And that answer is usually no, Steve. So a lot of what we like to say is, how can we help do, the heavy work for you so that you can focus on where your innovation really is? Because the world's moving so much faster than what it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20, 30. And so, if the next generation product company is not using the latest technology, whether that's AI or, partnerships with companies like Fictiv, your competitors are, and it's hard to keep up with that pace of change. And so, I think that really focusing on where is your differentiation in your business, and are you focused on doubling and tripling down on that investment? That's what I'd have a lot of people think about, and then figure out how you can partner, with people that do the other stuff, better than you.
So you mentioned that you had some sort of relationship with Misumi for a few years prior to the recent acquisition, but where are you at this point in kind of becoming an integrated part of their team, and where do you envision that going in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, as of the time of this podcast being recorded, we're only several weeks, post announcement here. I think what's really clear is that the combination of Fictiv plus Misumi is really Misumi doubling down on their vision to build a truly digital global manufacturing company. Digital being the key word there. And so we know that if we can simplify how companies source and build their products, we'll see a lot more innovation in the world. And so as we think about the integration, we want a single platform where people can order custom components. That's your machined or CNC or injection molded, whatever those processes might be, as well as your standard components, screws, springs, linear actuators, that are high precision and mission critical, all through a single, easy to use digital platform. And then you do that at the quality, that Misumi is known for, and Fictiv as well, that we work on some of the highest, most complex products in the world, to really help realize that. So, we are hell-bent to bring that vision to market as quickly as possible of building this, single digital platform globally. And, we also have the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years in our mind to not just do something that's a blip on the radar, but to build a lasting foundation, with companies that trust us to bring their products to market. So we have a short-term urgency, as we like to say, with a long-term point of view and focus.
You mentioned AI earlier. To what extent are you using that now, and how quickly is that technology progressing, and how can manufacturing overall use it effectively?
Yeah, I mean, we're using it every day, and the software we're developing is based upon the most cutting edge artificial intelligence technology. An example of this is we have a product called Materials AI. And man, I would have loved to have this as a manufacturer before, but we've, with all the data over a decade of building, we've tuned this AI to help make material recommendations for your product. And it used to be, Steve, when I was working at Ford, I'd go call up Randy and Randy had been there 30 years and say, hey, Randy, we're building this plastic, component for this infotainment system. What type of resin should I use? And you had to know Randy. Like Randy was a guy that, was our resin expert. But not every company has a Randy. And frankly, it's harder and harder to find that talent today. And on top of that, the technology, say for materials is changing. So we built this materials AI tool really to help engineers, supply chain professionals to have a back and forth around, okay, great. What are your thermal properties? What resin's available today? What manufacturing process can that resin be done in this example? And so those types of products really help speed up a lot of the decision making that happens, to help you get your product to market sooner. We have other tools that's all around our what we call DFM, design for manufacturing feedback, where we are analyzing a part for producibility so that you're speeding up design reviews and moving faster. And so, I think AI is here and changing the world around us incredibly quickly. We have some pretty exciting products, that are on the horizon that we'll be launching here, all in the AI space.
Well, hopefully all the resident resin Randys don't go away, but
Oh, they can't. No, they will just be way more effective in staying up to date. My wife's a doctor, and AI is not going to replace doctors. They're not going to replace the Randys of the world. What they do is they just allow us to make more complex products faster. So similar to robotics, I don't see this as a job threatening by any means. I see this as a democratization to give more access to the latest and greatest technology.
what do you see as some of the biggest challenges moving forward?
I think you have to look, manufacturers are amazing because they are curious people, meaning that they always see a better way to make something, to be more efficient, to drive OEE, to, build a better product. And I think that it's important as we talk about the technology changes that we remain curious, that we remain saying, hey, just because it was done this way, how might we actually adopt this AI tool or this way of, outsourcing some of our supply chain? And if that curiosity stays top of mind, Steve, I think we'll be able to, overcome some of the barriers related to legacy or thinking of possibly the past.
Well, we definitely depend on curious listeners to help drive our podcast with intelligent people like yourself. Thanks for joining us. And if listeners want to learn more about Fictiv, where should they go?
Pretty easy. Just go to fictiv.com, FICTIV.com. We have a lot of resources. We love developing nerdy content and blogs. We love being a part of podcasts like this, Steve. But yeah, you can find us at fictiv.com. You can find me on LinkedIn or X, otherwise known as Twitter, and pretty easy to Google. So, look me up, Dave Evans at Fictiv. Talk to me about my 1958 Mercedes that I'm working on, and would love to connect with any of the listeners here.
Now that sounds like another great podcast episode.
We'll have to save it. We'll have to save it for the next time. But yeah, thanks for having me, Steve, and this has been a blast.
All right, and to learn more about the latest manufacturing trends and hear more podcasts, visit us at advancedmanufacturing.org. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our feed.